Welcome to Blend's Localization Leaders series, where we interview industry leaders who are paving the way for advances in localization through their work. In today's episode, we're joined by Revolut's Giulia Tarditi. Revolut is a global financial app and banking alternative that allows users to send, spend, and save money. Thank you so much, Giulia, for joining us on our Localization Leaders series. I'm so excited to have you, especially after Anna mentioned you a few episodes back. And just excited to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to go through the interview.
Awesome. So I always like to start just by getting a little bit of background on your career and your journey. So can you start just by giving us a little bit of background on your career path, how you ended up in your current position as head of language experience at Revolut?
Sure. I studied cross-cultural communication. I never thought I would end up here. I thought I would be like a cultural mediator or something like that. But I've always been very good with languages and very good with process design, sort of innovating the way we get things done, and good at writing. So when it came to finishing my degree, I thought, okay, I'm going to become a journalist, perhaps, because I like writing. I was in London and I saw this position for a multilingual copywriter. I thought, oh, I can do that. Let me have a look at it. And then I was writing copy in different languages. The company didn't know anything with regard to the sort of localization landscape or processes. And when they started getting into it, I asked to own it, right? I was like, I think I can do this and pivot away from just doing the writing to owning the writing process across languages. And from there, it just, I think my first role that was absolutely defining for my career was when I went on to own the translations for Badoo, the social network / dating platform. And we went sort of 180 markets, 43 languages in like the space of less than 3 years. Wow. And it was a massive scale, also because all of the tools were built in-house. We had in-house translators. I was also owning the sort of product side of the tools that we would use to get our job done. And we also created a crowdsourcing platform to get the users to translate. Very fast-paced, very ambitious from a goal-setting perspective. And after that, I just started doing bits and bobs, consulting, moved on to some other companies that wanted someone senior to own localization. And I didn't just do it in a single industry. So I went from social network to games, then into, e-commerce, even sort of accommodation and real estate. Then more towards e-learning, and then I ended up at my first sort of finance-related localization gig, which was at Monese. I stayed there for 4 years. So first I was just doing localization, and then they had a restructuring, and I started being a product manager as well for the website and for some compliance related stuff that was so far away from localization, but gave me a lot of insight into what does it mean to be a PO, like what is product ownership all about. And I could get a lot of sort of juice that I could then funnel into the way I do things in my beloved localization. And I was always so interested in the relationship between language and experience. And so when someone from Qualtrics, the experience management software, knocked on my door to say, hey, we're looking for someone senior to set up like a center of excellence for how we do things in your realm, I thought that was a massive opportunity for me to learn as well as give back, right, into what I knew how to get done. And I stayed at Qualtrics for about 3 years. Very, very useful learning for me. There was this institute, the XM Institute, internal to Qualtrics, that was like, had all of these academic articles on experience, user experience, customer experience, and what actually happens in our brain as we go through experiences, that I could just absorb like a sponge and sort of embed into the way I manage our craft. So then Revolut, the Revolut opportunity sort of started showing on the horizon, and I was looking forward to going back to a more sort of B2C kind of space, because Qualtrics being a SaaS company, I guess I had less contact with the user per se, right? Like, or at least the persona that I was localizing for was a bit more strict in terms of like maybe a bit less colorful or varied.
Right.
So I jumped at the opportunity and I thought, okay, now I can really bring my experience, know-how, and the localization game into a single umbrella. At a really good scale. Obviously Revolut, like, quite a large company. We've got like offices all over the world, and we do in excess of 20 languages, but we also have an in-house team of linguists, which is fantastic, and it gives me like a good opportunity to really get stuck in and influence the doing in a way that you can't do in a sort of vendor only setup, for sure. And again, very ambitious, very fast-paced company. I have to say I like it this way, right? It's part of my DNA. Like I need it for the type of work that I do, maybe for the persona that I've built. In the Giulia work, it just goes with me. So here I am. It's been maybe 8 months now, and feels like yesterday, and also feels like 8 years. Very rewarding. Learned a lot. It's a place where you really have to learn a lot about the business before you can influence the game, and before you can really tweak the program, because there's a lot of specificities that come with it. And one thing that I've learned, and that I really advise people to do, is to basically start as a listener, right? To go in with a learner's hat on and just go like, okay, now I'm going to understand how the heck things work in here, what the company is trying to get done, their plan this year, their plan for the next 5 years, who are they trying to be, and explore how localization has been treated up until this point, if it had existed, and see things in motion without changing them for a bit. Because you need to go through the pain in a new setup, because it changes the way you would address that pain and make it less painful before you come up with recommendations. So the first few months was really a lot of that, a lot of the observing, getting to know people, getting to know how to get stuff done through the right channels. And now we're on to the doing, and I've got a fab management team under me, so I can be happier.
Wow, that's amazing. That makes a lot of sense to me too, especially someone new in the industry, and I'm doing also a lot of listening. So based on your years of experience, what do you think is the best way for global companies to set up their localization teams?
I don't think there is a single best practice. There isn't a playbook, for as much as people are going to tell you that there is. I had someone, I think it was Lockworld, not this year or a year before, saying, oh, I wrote the playbook for localization, or, oh, there is this book that exists. It doesn't. It's simply because localization is so unique. It needs to be a dress made to measure. So first, it depends what the company is, how it's structured. Is it a product-centric company? Is it a market-centric company? But also the right place for localization, right, where localization should sit, also depends on the life cycle, where the company is in their life cycle and their life journey. Maybe for a year or 2 years, it makes sense to have it in product. Then it can go to more sort of services or user operations. And so a lot of flexibility, I think, is key when trying to figure this out, and a lot of listening, eye for detail, and sort of taking a step back and think, right, before I recommend how this team should be structured, where it should sit, etc., I'm going to hold my horses, because we all want to get into, like, during the honeymoon period, when the company is so happy that they hired us finally and that we're in, they give us a lot of leeway. And the temptation is always like, show that I'm changing a lot right now. And that could be detrimental, because what we're doing is we're basically copy pasting something that has worked elsewhere, as opposed to just saying, right, what is this company trying to do? Right? What are they selling? Who are their users? What are they trying to do now? And where do they want to be in 5 to 10 years? Maybe 5, because in tech 10 is an error, right? And based on that, right, like, how do I walk backwards from it into how I structure this? In some companies, an in-house team would make sense, an in-house team of linguists, or in some companies, you just need to have 3 or 4 key people, the project manager, and outsource the rest. First you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. How does localization play into that, right? How can you support the strategic objectives of the company? And then that is your game, right? Like, ultimately they want X, so you can do Y and Z so that you boost the chances of achieving X. Mm-hmm. What team do you need to get Y and Z done? And first you need to understand what you get outsourced, what not, what's going to be your core team. And then have very specific KPIs that reflect the company's sort of overall goals, but more in a short-term way, right? So, okay, this is what I'm trying to get this quarter, next quarter, the one after, and be ready to iterate. Sometimes you're not getting the right setup done the first time around, and you have to be open to changing them. So a lot of, like, eyes on the ball. I know what I need to get done. Is this taking me there? Weekly, daily, right? Always keeping, like, I'm an old school kind of person, and I print generally, like, I write on paper my goals for the quarter, and I have them on my wall. My desk is facing a wall, and every day I look up, and before I start my day, I look up at my goal. Or when someone is trying to tell me to do something or pick up some other piece, or I look up and I look at my goals. Sometimes it's the goals that need rephrasing or tweaking, but very often we forget the goals. And we just get stuck in we're doing X, so we will continue until we're finished. Sometimes you just need a pivot. But so important, get the goals clear, build the right draft team, and see how you get on, right? And if you need to iterate.
What do you kind of look for in hiring a localization manager for your team?
2 things. 3. Passion, right? They need to get the language game. That is not just because someone speaks the language that they're a linguist, right? That there's more to it than that. They need to understand how to play with language in order to convince people to do something. Because let's face it, that's what we do in product localization, especially, right? Like, you are part of the UX game, and you're trying to convert the user to do X, Y, and Z, or to convince the user to sign up, whatever it is, right? So someone that gets that, and it's not a given. Someone that's data-driven. It needs to, they need to have some data literacy. So I recommend people get that. But they don't need to be a data guru, but they need to be data-driven. Right. They need to understand, or want to understand and learn quickly, how to consume data to make the right decisions, and to know if they're on the right path. And then the third one is they must have a hunger or a thirst for knowledge that comes, a curiosity, if you want, from other disciplines.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be like a localization rat, as in like someone that just looks at their localization corner and maybe knows everything there is to know about localization and translation, but then doesn't look at other disciplines to enrich their game. I want that in someone.
Okay, those are great things to look for. I actually had a professor. I studied advertising, and he spoke a lot about that, and that makes for a very, I guess, not only creative but well-rounded person. So jumping back a little bit to, you mentioned that when you first join a company that maybe they are very excited that they finally have someone doing localization, but sometimes it can be difficult to gain budget, even recognition for the need of localization or investing in localization. Do you have any tips for localization managers that need help demonstrating the value?
Yes, you need to speak the language of the people that you're trying to influence, right? So, and it's tough for us because we need to influence a lot of people, because we tend to sit horizontally and be like a service area or whatever type of area for everyone in the company. It's not that marketing has their own team, localization and product has their own team, support has their own team. So you need to know a few things, the basics of a lot of disciplines, right? You need to familiarize yourselves with the KPIs of the teams that you're trying to influence, their goals, right? Like what is keeping these people up at night? And think before you go and speak to them, how can I help make this guy's life easier so that he doesn't need to stay up at night? And so when you have that, you go and talk to them. And then influence is a given, right? Because you are relevant. Unless you're relevant, there's no influence. One of the best ideas I heard, I think I was at a conference and someone said that what was game changing was when they offered to translate into, I can't remember what language that was key to the business, to translate all the department KPIs for all departments as a localization team. And that was such a shortcut to them getting access to those KPIs. Because in some companies, all the KPIs are like in clear, like everyone knows what other departments' KPIs are. You just need to look them up in the system. But in some other, it's a bit more obscure. If it's obscure, find a smart way to gain access. You know what these guys are trying to do. And as a central area, you can also find the disconnects, right? You can be the guy that says, hang on a minute, product is trying to do X, but marketing is trying to do Y. And it looks like the two are counterintuitively not going together, right? So I don't know what I need to do, because I need someone to help me understand which of these things is really important for the company. So you can influence not just at that department level in the end of that stakeholder, but you can bring your influence up by finding this disconnect or finding the connects. Everyone wants to know. They will listen. And the way you can help them is very different from how support can help them, right? Or how legal can help them. So yes, they want to learn from you about that, but they don't want to learn about your plans, because your plans are abstract if they're not relevant to them.
Absolutely. And what I know that you mentioned, this first period of joining Revolut has been like a listening period, and now you're just in the doing. What do you feel is Revolut's greatest localization strength?
Their in-house team. They have an in-house team of linguists, which is such a riches. Like it's not a given, and it has so much expertise in it. And I think is also the fact that they managed to really hire for the DNA they wanted to have in a company. And that at company level, not just strictly localization. In localization specifically, there's so much expertise, not just about localization as a craft, but about the company, right? The product, how the product works, how the journeys are structured, how the funnels are structured, what are the paths for the users to get X, Y, and Z done, to get support, how do the users come in through the door, how are they retained? There's a lot of expertise about that in the localization team. And if you don't know a product, you can be the best linguist in the world. It's very, very hard to localize. That's why it's hard for me to work with vendors. I need to trust them a lot. I need a lot of conversations with the teams who are actually doing the writing or the post editing or whatever, because I need to ensure there is expertise. And Revolut, because it's an in-house team, and a lot of them have been there a long time, but also the onboarding and budding processes are really strong, so people can get in and get ramp really quickly. This expertise is something I've never seen in a localization team elsewhere.
I think we can move on to our rapid fire questions. So these are just short answers, get to know you a little bit better. So what is your favorite language?
Spanish.
Spanish. Okay. And what is your native language, by the way?
Italian.
Italian, that's what I thought from your name. Okay, cool. And what's your favorite localization tool?
Phrase. It's simple. It gets stuff done. I'm not using it right now. I don't really like it.
Nice. And what's your favorite place that you've traveled to?
Andalusia.
Oh, nice.
In Spain.
What's the best localization advice you've received, if it's different from what you mentioned?
Never, not specific to localization, right? But it was key to how I set up localization where I go. Never squeeze smart people into roles, but be ready to build roles around those people.
That's good advice. And what's the most successful market that you've invested in?
Ooh, China.
Nice. What would you say your localization nightmare is?
Not feeling heard. I have these nightmares. Sorry, this is a rapid question, but also not just within localization. I used to have this nightmare as a child where I would just try and speak, and the voice wouldn't come out. So I'm not having that anymore. But from a sort of metaphorical perspective, I know I listen, I learn, I have stuff to contribute. If then I don't feel heard, or I can't get stuff done.
Yeah.
That is my two nightmares.
Yeah. Fair. It's a fair nightmare. And who is your localization role model?
Ooh, this is tough. I'm gonna say Diego Cresceri. He runs a LSP company, Creative Words, and he's always in a good mood, always so thirsty, hungry for knowledge, new stuff, innovation, always ready for a battle, by which I mean a positive sort of one, so that you get through and to the other end and you're better, your team's better off, or and so positive. I like positivity. There's already so much negativity in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And which brand is your localization crush?
King, I think.
Nice. Awesome.
Games
So
is
that,
like, to
yeah.
me, like the number one inspiration when it comes to localization, the way they do. I know King, for example, like UX
Yeah.
writing, localization is in one place, which I think is how it should be. But ultimately, there's so much attention to the player's experience.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no
Yeah.
point. It's not just like a
Right.
usability item. Like, yeah, the game
Right.
is usable, so what? I'm gonna stop playing.
Yeah.
It has a lot to teach to all of us. Yeah,
Mhm.
and especially in B2C scenarios, right? Like your user is your player.
Yeah. I feel like gamers are really invested also in the whole experience, in the game, the story, and the characters, maybe more than you might think of a user, using a product. It might not necessarily be true, but it can be true that gamers are just very, very, very invested, and they care and they notice localization too. Uh, so that absolutely, that's so true. Great. So that was everything, Julia. Thank you so much. So just before we go, are there any localization projects that you have coming up at Revolut that we should look out for?
Just a creative use of AI in localization that is maybe not what one may expect, just in relation to getting the translations done. So I wish I could say more than that, but I can't. But it's exciting and it's challenging and it's happening fast. So I like.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you again, Julia, for just taking the time to speak with me and sharing your advice and insights and knowledge. Yeah, it was really great to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.